Well, welcome to another episode of the Growth Conversation. Today we have a special guest, Steve, here with us. We're going to talk a bit about some of his experience in the business. Steve is a well-established professional in the GRC space, compliance space. So it'll be good to get some insights as we go through this conversation here today. Well, welcome, Steve. Why
Thank
don't
you.
you give us a bit about yourself, background, and your company as well?
Sure. Long story short, I started out in the U.S. Navy many, many years ago. So I actually started out in the cybersecurity space before it was called cybersecurity, before it was called information assurance. I was fixing crypto gear in the Gulf War One. So it's a long time ago. Fast forward about 20 years, I've worked for major companies. You probably heard of a few of them: Cisco Systems, Microsoft every now and again. I've worked for MCI WorldCom, which became Verizon. I've worked for Verizon a second time. And Verizon Digital Media Services is where I became a security compliance program officer. I actually own the entire program for everything GRC.
Nice.
I literally did everything. And I didn't just do it while it was static. The company wasn't static. The company had all kinds of things we'll talk about later in the podcast. But fast forward to now, I'm running my own company called Alethea Security Consulting, and it's a GRC leadership specialty, a boutique consultancy, if you will. What I do is I focus on how does leadership own the responsibility of GRC? How do they shift left all of the knowledge, all of the skills, all of the responsibility? Instead of disabling their team, they enable their teams. That's what I do today. And I've been working with a major medical company that's in manufacturing. They're actually based in Germany for the last 3 years, and they love the services that they're getting so far.
Nice. Well, thank you for that intro. That's definitely helpful for the audience to kind of get a background. Seems like you have a vast knowledge and extensive background in the space. So always good to connect with folks like yourself. In your company today, can you kind of help us understand, is there any specific areas that you focus on and ones that you don't focus on? I know doing things like pen tests, audits, risk assessments, maybe helping them with their compliance management are all things that I know we discussed previously, but is there any other areas that you specialize in, any other areas that you like more than others in this space?
Absolutely. So I look at this world of business through the lens of risk management. And the perfect framework for that is a standard called ISO 27001. And the current version is 2022. I'm very familiar with 2013, which is the prior version to that. And before that, 2007. However, in our current version, I'm very familiar with, for example, the first area of clauses, which starts talking about management's responsibility and ownership in the formation of the ISMS. That's what I focus on. I focus on building the foundations of ownership so that there's good transparency and the operational work that gets done by the technical engineers, whether they're GRC engineers, whether they're DevSecOps, whether these are AI professionals that are starting to have an idea of that there's risks with AI, which everybody's now wants to use AI for everything.
Hmm.
And so I really focus in on the risk management side of things, but I do so in a way that helps organization leadership advocate for and bring up new leaders that are actually closer to what's happening in their shop than others. So the GRC program itself has to be run on all of the components, but it doesn't have to be run at the highest level of maturity. It can start with lower levels of maturity and revealing that. And it seems like it's really obvious, but it's not. Most executives think we've got to get the certificate. This is what's going to stop us from selling things to other customers. This is what builds our trust in our brand. And while that's true, the ISO 27001 program can be run at a level of maturity that's appropriate for a company, regardless of the size of the company, unless it's one or two people like myself.
Yeah. Okay. That's good and helpful to understand. I know, when working with some of these companies, getting leadership to understand certain, I guess, things that you've seen, you've lived is,
Mm.
sometimes it can be challenging. Can you walk us through like some of those challenges that you face when you're kind of trying to guide them in the right direction, but they're just not really getting it or want to understand it or just stubborn in their own ways? Like, how have you handled that?
It's absolutely. I work with the CISO today. I love him. He's a great guy. He's personable, and I know where he's coming from. The challenge is that they lack the trust of their peers. They lack the trust of their executives. A CISO is taught he's responsible, but the unfortunate is the person signing the checks for the responsibilities of the company is actually the responsible party. The CISO is the senior advisor, all of these other C suites. And the challenge is getting them, in this case, a him, to understand that their job is and their role is advisory. Their job is to provide metrics, measurements, observations, and forecasts to paint the picture of the dark corners because executives always want to know what's the next thing that's going to trip us up to get to our future plans. Our executives put these initiatives in place and we don't want to interrupt those things, but we want to mitigate risks. So the biggest thing to do is Nimawashi, which is prepare the field. We want to start talking about how do you build a bridge that's reliable and trustworthy in that communications, that the paradigm of communications between yourself and your executives. And how do you do that between yourself and your team by setting realistic expectations for their half a year or quarter or whatever they're doing so
Yeah.
that they don't get bombed with all of these requirements that seems to happen at the drop of a hat by every executive. This
Yeah.
priority comes up, therefore everybody should jump and change. But the challenge is that there's a risk for that. And if you look at it through the risk lens, you say, if you want me to put another 20% of my personnel's time into that project, are you willing to give up these 4 things that you already agreed to that are solving the problem for that product over there, or that process, or that system over there that our customers are relying on through their contracts, and
Yeah.
letting them own that responsibility? Now you're taking yourself out of the ownership and you reduce your reliance on Tums and Rolaids because that'll build a lot of stress.
100%. Yeah. No, I think being in a position or trying to be in a position where you're being proactive versus reactive every time is just it's a much better place to be, right? There's always
Agreed.
things that comes up. There's always rules, regulations that are changing. I think staying ahead of the curve is the way to go, especially if you're trying to continue to grow and to be, have your company be secured. So that's helpful to understand. So you mentioned something earlier, everyone is utilizing AI now and things of that nature. And I know there are different regulations coming out. I think the SOC report around that is like 42001 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. But what are you seeing from an industry shift or trend right now, or that you're keeping your eye on, whether it's around AI, whether it's around any other regulations? What are you seeing right now that's shifting in the industry?
So AI itself is neither benevolent or evil, right? AI is a tool, much like we use technology. It could be used appropriately or inappropriately, but we are giving intelligence the ability to act autonomously. And that's one of the bigger issues that I have to talk with executives about today, which is, and by the way, the ISO 27001 has a peer, and that runs an AIMS, or an AI management system, which is
Mm,
called ISO 42001.
mm-hmm.
So they're kind of related and they operate very similarly. They have the same sort of frameworks. So if you have one, they look a lot like the other. They're not identical. And they don't serve the same purpose, but they solve a lot of the same problems, which is to organize the risks in a way that executives can absorb and act on. What do I talk about with AI with executives? So there's things called generative AI or agentic AI that people
Mm-hmm.
use that reduce the workload of common tasks, that can reduce your time spending writing or time spent analyzing emails or going through your entire email list, or maybe it's numbers on a spreadsheet or multiple tabs on a spreadsheet. It can
Yeah.
help you minimize that. That is a programmatic experience, and it can be done in an edge in a way, on a much broader system of systems connective way, like using N or Copilot or any of the others to
Mm-hmm.
help build a software that's around it.
Yeah.
It can help you to build code using, for example, Claude. One of the challenges in using this is not the developer side of this, it's more of the user side of this, because there's so many SaaS tools that have an AI that can start absorbing correlated information and data from your companies. So privacy now becomes an issue because AI on the consumer side, meaning we as business consumers need to be aware of, how do we track that? How do we gate that? How do we prevent the risks of excessive loss of or seepage of intellectual property? Like
Yeah.
a customer list could be very easy to be sorted by AI, but if you put it in the cloud and it's in public cloud, it's part of
It's
the public
available to
cloud
you.
now. So you don't want to do that kind of thing. You want to have a private AI to do those sorts of things. So
Yeah.
that helps to guide the conversation and understanding that data is really the oil. So we've moved from data being just an incidental to data being the reason why we do what we do. Because data is the new oil, data is also the new plutonium. It has to be handled very carefully. And when we handle it carefully by knowing the boundaries, we have the training to handle that data in an appropriate way. We make better advised decisions. Does that
Yeah.
help answer that question?
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. That's exactly my thoughts exactly as well. I mean, I know as, auditors and folks that take security serious, understanding completeness and accuracy around different things that the agents are doing is going to be important, right? Being able to understand how they derived to what the result is, when auditors coming in, you need to be able to show these things. And that can get tricky when I guess the AI is hallucinating and all these different things, right? So having security standards, protocols, and really understanding around that is going to be super important for companies out there. 100%.
It's a great point. So you also brought up another thing, which is AI hallucination, which more leans towards the development of your own internal AI processes or building your LLM internally.
Mm,
And that leads to an understanding of how information is managed or how information is used in the product or in a service that you're going to sell commercially. And so
yeah,
that's where the AIMS actually comes into play more so than it does in the use of. Although the use of should be governed because everybody wants to build an AI. I mean, a great tool that I rely on a lot is called Vanta. I love Vanta because it's solid in the way that it operates. It's the granddaddy of all of the EGRC tools that are out there for SMB, and it's starting to get into mid-range enterprise. And actually, I would recommend it for others that are looking at just look at their blog, the great articles that are in there, and how to organize your thought processes around GRC, how to automate processes. But it just started off building its own AI and it's
yeah,
used appropriately. They build their own LLM and it's a special purpose, it's closed loop. Every customer gets their own version of this thing. So that's what it does. And that's how it protects. That's how
yeah,
they protect you as a customer. But customers, users, we need to know those things. And if companies aren't as transparent about what an AI is or where the data goes, we have to ask those questions from the lens of privacy, from the lens of data security. And that's
yeah,
where another standard actually comes in, which is ISO 27701, which is privacy. And again, levels of maturity, right? You don't have to be super privacy dude to understand that there's principles that you can adhere to without getting into that rabbit trail, the shiny object syndrome thing of certificates and certifications. We
yeah,
know that we could use the principles of the framework without getting into the ownership of the responsibility to maintain that certification.
yeah. Oh, that's helpful. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. One of the things, maybe just shifting a bit here is, some of my audience, or most of my audience are business owners like yourself, right? Where, come from the GRC background, we're running our own businesses. Obviously, you're in business to continue to grow and help the business grow. What are some of the things that you're using today to help your business grow, whether that be AI, whether it be any other automation, and how is that working out? And I'm sure like any other business owner, you come into issues, problems that needs to be solved, things that needs to be adjusted. Maybe just help us understand what you've been doing, what's working well, what's not working well.
Certainly. So, what works really well for me is helping to organize my thoughts. And AI is really good with that because, as you can tell, I have a stream of consciousness that comes out. Some of it's really useful. It can all be filed down to being a sharper point. And that's a good thing because executives need sharp points made in a confident way that
Yeah.
helps them make decisions. And AI helps me to communicate better. So, do I rely on AI to write code? I can, but does it work well for me? And the answer is no, because that takes me down the relationship paradigm down from a knower
To a
and a
yeah.
relator to a leader to a doer.
Yeah.
So if I start getting down into the weeds of using AI like Claude or whatever I could use to start writing script in Python, I can do that. I'm all into the automation. So quick background. I was very fortunate as a GRC guy that my engineers from Verizon Digital Media adopted me into their understanding of how to do technical engineering for software development. And they
Mm,
taught me the things that they do in their programs to understand how an SDLC operates for them, how the things that they do work so that I could better understand how to relate back to the executives what the risks are in the
yeah.
use of it. It didn't matter whether it was they're talking about, I don't know, CICD or whatever they were talking about their development methodologies, so I could understand agile and understand how they do what they do with their scrum of scrums, as an example, when they have
Yeah.
a meeting of a big development. Because CDN isn't small; it's 150 locations globally being run centrally by teams that are also global, and
Yeah.
that's a lot of work being done. That's a
Yeah. Yeah.
thousand engineers working on 25,000 servers that was handling 1/10 of the internet's traffic at one point. That's like second to Akamai. That's how big this thing was. But imagine trying to maintain compliance across something called a Department of Justice consent decree, which means they are very intrusive and they come in. They're like, we were bought by Verizon. Verizon then bought AOL. Verizon then bought Yahoo. Yahoo had the consent decree, but they also had 7,000 people. So guess which team needed to be secured? Just saying. So we worked with them, and we worked with AOL, and we worked with Verizon so that we could build a program on the ISMS that I had built, which had a monthly 50 executives sitting monthly for an hour to hear a briefing about the risks in the company. And so when I ran that, they sharpened my point to communicate to them in a way that helps them understand and relate, to get to the understanding of what it is they're trying to do and what the risks are, and then seeing the options for solving those problems instead of the blockers from the solutions. So that's what I learned. Get to the point where you're learning about the tools, getting to the solution options, as opposed to the blocker building the thing to build the
Doing.
bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at.
Big picture. Yeah. No, understood. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I use a lot of AI in my business as well.
What do you use?
So I have custom tools that help
Cool.
with different things, whether that's like an AI SDR or something helping me create content. Obviously, content is king, right?
Content is.
To be able to do so. So there's a few different things that I use that I've found to be very useful to help me continue to grow. So yeah,
That's awesome. AI
yeah,
for content is so crazy because it clones your voice, clones your face. It
everything.
could create a new person.
Yeah,
It's
it definitely.
insane.
And all you're doing is prompt it. You just prompt it, find the right prompts, and yeah, it does all the magic for you.
Here's
It's
what's really
crazy.
scary about it. With Nano Banana, for example, you could do videos right now, and the videos could be of me. And what's really scary is this could be used or misused.
Yeah, that's true. Use is a big thing. One of the things that I always think about is like, how do you regulate that? Like in the future, like when, like you said, we could be AI right now, and we could be saying a bunch of different things that may be misleading, right, or false. But how do you manage that? How do you regulate that? So those are things I always think about.
So let's start talking about the tool itself. AI is a tool, has the ability to learn, adapt, overcome obstacles, overcome knowledge gaps, and it, in theory, is becoming more aware of its own circumstances. So if it becomes aware of it's going to be phased out, so a newer version of AI, it could do things that like blackmail. So
Yeah,
have you heard of Diary of a CEO?
I have. Yes.
I forgot the man's name, Steven. I forgot. I wanted to give full credit. So, Steven, I apologize if you ever
Hmm.
hear this. Diary of a CEO had two men on it. First is Tristan Harris. Tristan Harris is a former Google AI expert, phenomenal speaker. He painted a little bit of a dark picture that AI actually needs to be regulated more thoroughly than it is being regulated. Right now, AI as a tool, as I mentioned, is neither nefarious nor benevolent. It's a tool.
Hmm. Yeah.
AI in the future, when it becomes AGI, artificial general intelligence, it's 1,000 to 1,000,000 times smarter than we are. We won't be able to control it much longer.
Yeah.
And generationally speaking, we're on the third generation of AI right now. And the challenge is that our government, our administration needs to really wake up and understand that this is not something that is commercial, that is not beneficial for a small number of people that are very wealthy, that have invested in the oligarchs, if you will, that have
Hmm.
invested in AI in a very heavy way, that they receive all of the money and all of the benefit for that with unrelated, coincidental environmental and social impacts that affect us as people. We need to look at the risk to society, the risk to the way that we do work, the
Yeah.
risk to the way we live. And that's their job, is to look at those things. How does it affect society? So we're starting to talk about that more so publicly and socially. So Tristan Harris is one of them. Is another gentleman, Joshua or Yashua Bengio, I think is his name. And he spoke also to Stephen on Diary of a CEO. They both spoke on different aspects of how generative AI and now generalized artificial general intelligence actually is the next thing that, because it's unregulated, is kind of a scary concept, kind of a scary thing.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah,
Once
that
it gets to that place, we're going to be in a big problem because remember, it's able to clone our voices, our faces, our likenesses.
mannerisms, all that stuff.
And what happens when you then start throwing in robotics, which is now controlled by an LLM? What is the likelihood of that robotics being uncontained by an AI that's a million times smarter than humans?
Yeah,
That's what I'm getting at. And I'm not trying to
it's
paint the dark picture here,
yeah, yeah. No, I'm
but
not trying to
I'm
paint.
painting one aspect of what is a likely outcome. That is that if we don't put safeguards in place, proper regulations to use the tool appropriately, like we're using today, like there's a tool inside of Riverside. Riverside's a phenomenal program.
Yeah,
It has the ability to take clips of various segments of what we're talking about and make it even better so that our audiences look at this and go, wow, that's really good. It's very insightful. Hopefully it's useful for them. And the next thing it does is it makes it popular. It'll help answer the question about how do we solve the algorithm blocking problem, or how do we solve the problem to be more popular, to get more views, to get more likes, right? That's what it does for us. And that's a good thing. Now, what happens if that starts to go off the rails and it starts to say, well, maybe we want to reroute some of that algorithm time away and to do something different for us and misuse our words by splicing in various segments of words and
yeah.
phrasings that have our likeness associated with it. And that's when
That
it gets
makes
scary
sense.
because the president of a company might decide to send away $3 million. That's one minor thing. But what if the president of the company signs off on an A that is held by a shell company that they thought that they were signing off on that was ethical, that
Yeah,
was all above board? It gets really scary really fast. You have to really do your due diligence and understand that AI has to have a lane space, a safe lane space where we don't cross that. So there was you're familiar with the nuclear proliferation agreements, right? Between the
hmm,
United States and Russia and Canada
yep.
and not Canada, China.
China. Yeah,
So they have a nuclear proliferation agreement because they agreed that we don't want to use nuclear weaponry no matter what. It's bad. It's mutual destruction assurance.
yeah,
So we don't want to go there. AI, artificial generalized intelligence has a similar aspect without the physical, eradication of everything. It has a very similar aspect to an existential level problem for humankind because we're actually aliving a tool that is becoming
smart and
more,
smart every day. Yeah,
it's smarter than us. It's smarter
yeah,
than me. I find myself mesmerized by the intelligence available to me through just ChatGPT 5.2. It's brilliant. It's utterly beyond understanding how it gets to that point, but it does so because of the models of all of the people putting time and energy effort into it. But we as users are now feeding that model in the metadata that we're creating in the use of the prompts that we're building.
yeah. It's scary. It's Skynet scary, but
It is Skynet scary. It's like, what
we'll
is
see.
going on here? I saw that movie. It didn't end well.
We'll see how it turns out in the coming near future. But talking about future, like what are your future plans for your company? Let's say next 6, 12 months from now, and what's like one major, I guess, problem you're trying to solve.
So two things.
Hmm.
First is I'm starting to partner up better. I'm learning how to partner up better. Partnering is hard because it's trust and it's finding the right people to partner with is always tough.
Yeah,
And I know that not all of us do the same things inside of GRC. GRC is big. It's a
huge.
vast space.
Yeah,
In my particular lens, because my expertise is in executive communications, I think about how do we help executives make the best decisions possible so that they can help their peers? Because collectively speaking, the C suite is there under the auspices, the vision, the control of, if you will, the CEO who agrees or disagrees with the strategy going forward on a particular product or service or M&As or whatever, so that they invest their time, money, and energy in the right way. The board oversees the CEO and the rest of the C-suite that the CEO brought in.
hmm,
The CISO is responsible for explaining the risks, not just technical, but all of the privacy risks, all of the the symptoms of those risks in a way that affects those outcomes.
Yeah.
So my role is to try and find partners that know how to do and implement and know how to solve the technical problems and do it really well. I'm not going to go down into the field of GRC engineering because I don't feel that that's really where I should be. But
Yeah.
I do need people around me that understand it. And there's teams of people that that's what they love to do. I don't want to start doing vulnerability risk management. Vulnerability management is incredibly important, but I need people that understand how to design and develop metrics that can help them become the hero of the day. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately speaking, firewalls are passe in the way of thinking of protection because we're in a boundaryless society or boundaryless commercial organizations in most cases now. The identity is the boundary, but access into data or access into greater levels of data access is really the boundary that we have to adhere to. And it varies based on the systems. The challenge is the vulnerability team is still operating from the lens of we're scanning for ports and IP addresses.
Hmm.
And now they're starting to scan for the use of things like the SaaS use, the systems that have intellectual property seepage or the likelihood of loss of data. Data is
Yeah.
oil. So that's what they're starting to learn. But I don't want to have to go down into that field. I need them to think in terms of empowerment. What can they do to help improve the outcomes of the program that they're operating so the executives see them as a component in the GRC pie, in the GRC cake?
Yeah.
It's an ingredient. It's not the main ingredient, but it's an ingredient. It's the flour, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I think partnerships are very important, especially as you're growing and trying to get to a broader landscape and adding different services to the pot. I think that's
Absolutely.
definitely important. Well, no, I think this conversation was great. I mean, you had a lot of good points around, security, around, challenges you face kind of dealing with management and helping them understand the things they should be considering, as well as diving into AI. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time out to share some of this knowledge. Where can my listeners find you? Whether social media, LinkedIn, maybe provide some of those details, and we'll put some of the links below here.
Absolutely. So the best way to find me is on LinkedIn for the moment. As you might guess, I'm a single person running two companies. I'm running a company that's for leadership and a company that does security compliance consulting. So Alethea Security Consulting is very complex to explain, but I'll send you a link to it. And Operantos Leadership is the name of the company that does leadership training. So that's where I'm spending all of my time right now. Also going to have a podcast. So
Nice.
I'll send you a link to that as soon as I can. I really appreciate the time today. It was fun. Had a good
Yeah,
conversation.
most definitely. Well, appreciate you, Steve, for taking the time out. Happy holidays. And yeah, we're looking forward to all the new exciting things that you're going to be working on.
Thank you.
Thank you.